On October 16, Piers interviewed Youssef Bassem, an Egyptian comedian, about the Israeli-Hamas war. Let's review Bassem's claims and show you how he ignores the big picture.
The question is, what is a proportionate response? Because it has been different from one tier to another. So if you look to this graph, for example, this is the death of Israeli and Palestinians, and it's changing from one year to year. It's like fluctuating like crypto. So my question is today, what is the going rate today for human lives?
Israel does its best to defend the lives of all innocent people, now and always. For example, before targeting a building occupied by both Hamas and civilians, Israel engages in something called roof knocking, where it drops a demi bomb that shakes the building but does not destroy it. This warns the civilians to escape. Let's watch what roof knocking is. Israel instructed the people of Gaza to evacuate out of the war zone to the southern part of the Gaza Strip and provided a safe route where they would not be in danger. Hamas instead requested that civilians stay put. It wants to use them as human shields against Israeli forces. Hamas wants to be able to hide and blend into civilians. So Israeli forces will not know who to attack. As well, they generally do not wear uniforms. For Hamas, the more dead civilians, the better. It can then use the images of dead people to sway world opinion. Let's watch an example of using civilians. The truth is, Israel is going after Hamas, not the people of Gaza. Israel opposes arming innocents, but Hamas, as we have seen from the footage from October 7th, murdered and kidnapped civilians that didn't pose any threat to them. Hamas is ISIS. Israel could use its military force without considering civilian casualties, but it takes the moral high ground and does its best to prevent innocent casualties. Let's watch the Israeli force warn civilians using leaflets. Hamas's goal was to kill innocent people. Israel values the lives of every person, even the people of Gaza that show no desire to live in peace. Israel exists to defend its citizens, so it invested in shelters and Iron Dome, a missile system to intercept Hamas rockets. Israel also built a fence to prevent terrorists from crossing the Gaza border into Israel. Hamas works towards killing Jews, not defending its people. It does not invest in defending the people of Gaza because it wants to show the world civilian casualties. The blood of the innocent people is on Hamas's hands.
Imagine a world without Hamas.
Right.
What will this world look like? Let's give this word a name, and let's name this word the West Bank. Hamas has absolutely no control in the West Bank, and since the beginning of this year, only through August, 37 Palestinian kids were killed. No music festival, no paragliding, no Hamas. Since the occupation of the West Bank, 7,000 Palestinians were killed.
Here, Youssef makes accusation while leaving out important context. In short, in the West Bank, there are Israeli and Palestinian Authority forces to defend both sides. Naturally, Hamas has its own interests in the West Bank, with terror cells waiting for orders. Without Israeli presence, things would be as bad as in Gaza. The Israeli forces are there to defend its citizens, just like the USA went after Al-Qaeda after 9/11. Any democratic state would do the same if terrorists from other countries attacked and killed its citizens. The terrorists in the West Bank also create riots that put Israeli troops in danger. Some parents even send their children to throw rocks at Israeli cars and soldiers. Rocks may not sound like much, but they can and have killed Israelis, especially when causing road accidents. When these attacks happen, Israeli soldiers will shoot to deter and disperse crowds, but if their lives are at stake, they must defend themselves with lethal force if necessary. Unfortunately, sometimes children are killed in these clashes, but it is the children's own parents who often encourage them to attack Israelis, and so it is the parents who ultimately bear the blame.
They said Israel is the only military force in the world that warns civilians before bombing them. I mean, how fucking cute. That is so nice of them. Because with this logic, if Russian troops started warning Ukrainians before bombing their houses, we're cool with Putin.
Putin started a war of aggression against a peaceful country. Israel is defending itself after being attacked. Furthermore, the Ukrainian army doesn't hide behind its civilians. Israel doesn't want to add the Gaza Strip to its territory. Unlike Putin with Ukraine, Israel withdrew its troops and citizens from Gaza in 2005 in the disengagement plan and left the people of Gaza to rule themselves. Unfortunately, no war, no matter how ethically waged, can avoid all civilian casualties. It's ugly, it's messy, and people die. In World War II, hundreds of thousands of German civilians were killed, but no one argued that Nazi Germany should have been left alone. The same is true of Hamas. Israel doesn't want to harm civilians, but sadly, it is an unavoidable part of defeating Hamas. In the current situation, Israel must behave like any democratic state must, to defend its people. There is no one to blame for the people of Gaza leaving their homes but Hamas and the people themselves. Hamas was democratically elected and enjoys widespread support among Gazans.
Now, right now, in Palestine, in West Bank and Gaza, 20% of Palestinians go through Israeli prison system, whether imprisonment, whether interrogation, whether torture. And the rest of them, they live a life of daily loss of land, of homes, of life, and they are suffocated by this. So let me ask you something. If you are a Palestinian living into these conditions for decades, would you sympathize with your oppressor or sympathize with the people who claim they resist them even if they are terrorists?
Throughout history, Israel has proposed several peace agreements and steps to build trust with the Palestinians. These offers were made by prime ministers from both sides of the Israeli political spectrum. Separate offers in 1993, 1996, 2000 and 2008 all failed, and two offers for a Palestinian state were rejected by the Palestinian leadership. The failure was widely attributed to the Palestinians' leadership not being truly interested in peace and the subsequent beginning of the Second Intifada. From 2000 to 2005, the Palestinians unleashed a wave of suicide bombing that killed and maimed over 1,000 Israelis. Throughout these talks, the Palestinians were given the chance to take responsibility for themselves, living on their own land and obtaining freedom and equality. But time after time, they refused and turned to violence, which shows they were never truly interested in freedom, but rather the destruction of the Jewish people. They weren't really interested in land. Israel offered enough land for homes for all Palestinians, but they couldn't bear the thought of compromise and want all of Israel for themselves. The Palestinians are not willing to compromise, and this is why there is no peace. But you don't have to take my word for it. Look at the facts. Israel has peace agreements with Egypt, Jordan, Morocco, Sudan, Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates, and was in talks with Saudi Arabia for normalizing the relations. The talks have now been put on hold, with many believing that the attacks were timed to prevent Israel and Saudi Arabia from allying against a nuclear Iran. The facts are that Israel is pursuing peace and willing to compromise, and the Palestinians are not.
The thing is, this is the problem. Israel always victimizes itself, and I have never seen a victim putting their oppressor under siege and bombing them 24/7. Israel wants you to believe that they are the victim. Dealing with Israel is so difficult. It's like being in a relationship with a narcissistic psychopath.
This is a very childish way of looking at reality. The more powerful side is not always the oppressor, and the weaker side is not always the victim. After 9/11, the USA, which was far more powerful than Al-Qaeda, did what it needed to stop Al-Qaeda from committing more attacks. When ISIS was brutally conquering parts of the Middle East, it too was weaker than America, but it was still the aggressor. In World War II, the British defeated Nazi Germany, but no one would argue that the British weren't the victims of Nazi aggression. In Youssef's view, no one should ever retaliate against a terror attack if they are more powerful than the terrorists. But the reality is that the goal of any response is not to do a lot of damage, but to stop the terror from spreading. Islamic extremism may have started with Israel, but it will not stop there.